Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and something feels off. The house is strangely quiet. No hum from the refrigerator. No soft buzz from electronics. Your phone shows no signal, and the Wi-Fi icon is gone. You walk to the window and notice the streetlights are still dark, even though the sun is already rising. You flip the light switch once, twice. Nothing happens. At first you think it's just a local outage. Maybe a transformer blew somewhere nearby. But then an hour passes. Then two. But phone battery starts dropping and there's still no update, no message, no explanation. The power grid is simply gone. Now here's the question almost no one ever asks themselves. How long could your home actually survive without the power grid? Not how long you could tolerate it, but how long your house, your food, your water, your daily life could keep functioning before things start falling apart. Most people believe they would be fine for a few days. After all, we have food in the fridge, water in the sink, phones, flashlights, maybe a few candles somewhere in a drawer. It feels like we're prepared. But the truth is far more fragile than most people realize. Because modern homes are not built to function without electricity. In fact, nearly every system that makes your house comfortable, safe, and livable depends on a continuous flow of power from the grid. Take your refrigerator, for example. The moment the electricity stops, the countdown begins. A closed refrigerator can keep food cold for about 4 hours. After that, temperatures start rising quickly. Within a day, most of what's inside becomes unsafe to eat. Freezers last a little longer, maybe 48 hours if they stay closed. But eventually, the food you relied on disappears. And that's just the beginning. Then there's water. Many people assume water will always flow from the tap. But in many homes and cities, water systems rely on electrically powered pumps to maintain pressure. When the grid goes down, those pumps eventually stop. At first, the water pressure weakens. Then it disappears entirely. Suddenly, something as simple as filling a glass of water becomes impossible. And communication. That disappears faster than people expect. Cell towers have limited backup power. Internet providers rely on electrical infrastructure across entire regions. Without power, routers die, towers shut down, and the digital world we rely on every day goes silent. No news updates, no messages, no way to know what's happening beyond your neighborhood. What makes this even more unsettling is how quickly daily life starts to change when electricity disappears. The systems we trust, food supply, water, communication, transportation, are all connected to the same fragile network. The power grid isn't just something that keeps the lights on. It's the invisible backbone of modern life. And the moment it stops working, everything else begins to follow. So the real question isn't just, what happens if the power goes out? The real question is how long before your home stops functioning the way you expect it to. Because once you begin looking closely at how dependent our homes have become on the grid, you start to realize something that most people never think about. We're far more vulnerable than we believe. And this is where things start getting uncomfortable to think about. Because the first few hours of a blackout don't feel like a crisis. At first, it just feels inconvenient. The lights don't work. The Wi-Fi is gone. Maybe the TV won't turn on. Most people assume the power company will fix it soon. You light a candle, maybe open a window, and wait. But as the hours pass, the situation begins to change in ways most people never expect. By the time the first 12 hours go by, small problems start stacking up. Your phone battery is nearly empty because everyone is checking for updates. The refrigerator is already warming up. The house begins to feel strangely disconnected from the world. No internet, no news, no confirmation of what's really happening outside your neighborhood. Then comes the first full day. At around 24 hours without electricity, the modern lifestyle most of us depend on starts quietly collapsing. Grocery stores can't keep their refrigerators running. Gas stations rely on electric pumps to dispense fuel. ATMs stop working. Card payment systems fail. Even many hospitals start switching to emergency backup systems, hoping the power returns before those generators run out of fuel. And something else happens that people rarely think about. Uncertainty spreads faster than the outage itself. When no one knows how long the blackout will last, people start reacting differently. Some rush to buy supplies. Others try to leave the city. Suddenly, the normal systems we rely on, food distribution, transportation, communication, start behaving unpredictably. By the second day, the situation becomes much more serious inside the average home. Freezers begin losing their ability to preserve food. Fresh groceries spoil. Water systems in some areas begin to struggle as pumping stations fail or reduce pressure. Charging devices becomes nearly impossible. And once darkness falls again, the absence of light feels very different from the night before. Because now you start realizing something. Your house was never designed to operate independently. It was designed to depend on the grid every second of every day. And that realization raises a question that more and more people have quietly started asking themselves over the last few years. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. If the power grid is the single system that holds everything together, what happens if you could remove that dependency, even partially? What if your home could still generate power on its own when the grid fails? Interestingly, this is exactly what some people have begun exploring. Instead of relying entirely on the traditional electrical network, they're learning simple ways to create small amounts of independent energy at home, enough to keep critical things running when the unexpected happens. In fact, I recently came across a guide that explains how ordinary households are experimenting with alternative energy setups that don't rely completely on the grid. It's called the Energy Revolution system, and what caught my attention wasn't some flashy promise, but the idea behind it, showing people practical ways to understand how energy can be produced at home using surprisingly simple concepts. Now, I'm not saying it's the perfect solution for everyone, but what it does show is something important. Our homes don't necessarily have to be as dependent as we've always assumed. And once you start thinking about that possibility, the entire question of a power outage begins to look very different. Because the real issue isn't just whether the grid fails. The real issue is whether your home has any backup plan at all if it does. Now imagine that the blackout doesn't end after one day, or even two. By the time the third day arrives, something changes in the way people think about the situation. The first hours were confusion. The first day was inconvenience. But after 72 hours without electricity, the reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer a temporary disruption. It's a full breakdown of the systems we depend on. Inside most homes, the effects are already visible. Refrigerators are empty or filled with spoiled food. Freezers have thawed. Phones are completely dead. The small backup batteries people rely on for emergencies are long gone. Even simple things like lighting a room after sunset suddenly require planning. But the bigger issue isn't just comfort, it's infrastructure. Cities are designed around constant electricity. Water treatment plants rely on power. Fuel distribution relies on power. Traffic systems, security systems, communication networks. They all depend on the grid working continuously in the background. When that backbone disappears, the entire structure begins to weaken. And yet, something interesting happens during situations like this. While most homes become completely powerless, a small number of people seem far less affected. Not because they predicted the exact moment of the blackout, but because they decided at some point to stop depending entirely on the grid. You might have seen examples of this already. Houses with solar panels, cabins in remote areas running on independent energy systems, small off-grid setups that can generate power even when the main network fails. These aren't futuristic technologies anymore. In many cases, they're surprisingly simple solutions that people have been experimenting with for years. And the more you look into it, the more you realize something important. Energy independence doesn't always mean building a massive system or spending thousands of dollars. Sometimes it starts with understanding the basic principles of how power can be produced and stored at a small scale. That's actually why resources like the Energy Revolution system have been getting attention online. The idea behind it is pretty straightforward. It walks through alternative ways people have started generating electricity at home using simple components and concepts that most of us never learned about growing up. Again, this isn't about claiming it's some magical fix for every situation, but it does open the door to a different way of thinking about energy. Instead of asking, what happens if the grid goes down? The question becomes, what parts of my home could still keep running if it did? Because when you look at the reality of how dependent modern life has become on electricity, even a small amount of independent power can make a massive difference during an outage. A few lights, the ability to charge devices, keeping essential appliances running. Suddenly, the situation inside your home feels completely different from everyone around you. And that leads to the final question most people never ask themselves until it's too late. The final question is actually very simple. If the power grid stopped working tonight, would your home have any way at all to keep going? Not the city, not the government, not the power company. Your home. Because when you really think about it, most of us have spent our entire lives assuming the grid will always be there. The lights come on when we flip the switch. The refrigerator runs 24 hours a day. Water flows from the tap without us even questioning where the pressure comes from. Electricity has become so normal, so constant, that we rarely stop to consider how fragile that entire system actually is. And yet history shows that large outages do happen. Storms, infrastructure failures, cyber attacks, even simple technical breakdowns have caused massive blackouts in different parts of the world. When they do, the people who are affected the most are usually the ones who never imagined it could happen to them. But the interesting thing is that preparing for that possibility doesn't necessarily mean turning your life upside down or living in fear of disasters. For many people, it simply means learning more about how energy works and exploring ways to make their homes a little less dependent on a single centralized system. That's exactly why guides like the Energy Revolution system have been gaining attention lately. Instead of focusing on panic or worst-case scenarios, it focuses on understanding simple methods people are using to generate small amounts of electricity at home. Things that can help keep essential devices running if the grid ever goes down, or even just reduce dependence on traditional energy sources. If you're curious about that idea, I left a link in the pinned comment where you can take a closer look at it and decide for yourself whether it's something worth exploring. And just to be clear, this video is purely for educational and informational purposes. It's not financial advice, and it's definitely not telling you what decisions you should make about your home or your energy setup. But what it does encourage is something far more important: awareness. Because the truth is, the power grid is one of the most complex systems ever built. And like any complex system, it works incredibly well, right up until the moment it doesn't. So maybe the real takeaway from all of this isn't fear. Maybe it's simply asking yourself one honest question tonight. If the lights went out, how long could your home really keep going? And more importantly, would you want the answer to that question to stay the same forever?